Picture the moment an idea arrives, the great one, the one that changes everything. How do you see it? You see a flash, a bolt of lightning out of a clear sky, a lone genius struck in a single instant. The apple falls, the bath overflows, the light bulb blinks on. And in that flash, something that did not exist a moment before suddenly does. It is one of the most beautiful stories we tell about ourselves, that ideas are born from nothing, inside the minds of the gifted few, a kind of magic reserved for a special kind of person. The rest of us simply wait and hope that one day the lightning might choose us too. And that whole picture, however lovely, is almost entirely false. Now, not the feeling. The flash itself is real. People do feel the jolt, the sudden click, the eureka. That part is true. But the story around that flash, the lightning from nowhere, the idea from nothing, the lone mind creating out of thin air, that is the myth. And it may be the most misleading thing we believe about where the new actually comes from. Because ideas are not born, they are assembled, slowly, quietly, from pieces that were already lying around. And the flash you see, the eureka, is not the moment of creation. It is the last and smallest step, the final click of a machine that has been running for a very long time in the dark. Somewhere you could not see it, somewhere even you could not feel it working. And this matters more than almost anything you believe about yourself. Because if ideas are lightning, then you either have the gift or you do not. You wait, you hope to be struck. And if you are not, you decide you are simply not creative. But if ideas are assembled from pieces over time in the right conditions, then creativity is not a gift at all. It is a process, one with rules, one you can understand, and one anyone can learn to run. So over the next while, we are going to take the flash apart, to follow the idea backward from the eureka into the dark that came before it, to see what it is really made of and where it truly comes from. And by the end, the lone genius, struck by lightning, will be gone, replaced by something far stranger and far more useful. A picture in which the best idea you will ever have was never entirely yours to begin with. So start with the first hard truth, the one that dissolves the whole idea of creation from nothing. No idea comes from nothing, not one, not ever. Every idea you have ever had, every idea anyone has ever had, is built entirely out of older ideas, pieces that already existed, rearranged, recombined, connected in a way no one had connected them before. To create is not to conjure, it is to combine. Take one of the most world-changing inventions in all of history, the printing press. It feels like pure genius, a bolt from nowhere. It was nothing of the kind. Every single piece of it already existed. Ink was old. Paper was old. Metal letters, the idea of stamping symbols, already there. And the machine that pressed it all together was borrowed, almost unchanged, from the presses that squeezed juice from grapes to make wine. So what did the inventor actually do? He did not create a single one of the parts. What he created was the connection. He looked at a wine press and at the stamping of letters, two things that had sat side by side for years. And he saw for the first time that one could serve the other. That was the whole invention, not a new part, a new link between old ones. The genius was not in making something from nothing, it was in seeing a connection that was already, quietly, possible. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. It is true of everything. Every invention, every theory, every song, every story. The phone in your pocket is a bundle of older inventions. The radio, the computer, the camera, the telephone, fused into one. The great novel is old words, old feelings, old human situations, arranged in a new order. The scientific breakthrough is two known facts from two distant fields, finally introduced. Nothing from nothing, everything from recombination. And this should change how the whole thing feels, because pure originality, creating out of the void, is terrifying. It is a blank page, the size of the sky. No wonder it feels like it needs a miracle. But combination is something else entirely. It is not conjuring from nothing. It is arranging what already is. And that is a thing you can actually do. You do not have to invent the pieces. You only have to gather them and find the link that no one has found yet. But if every idea is a recombination of what already exists, then something follows, something with enormous consequences. You cannot combine pieces that are not yet there. At any moment in history, only certain ideas are even possible. The ones you can build from the pieces that exist right then. Thinkers have a name for this invisible boundary. They call it the adjacent possible, the set of all things reachable from right here. The next doors you are able to open, and you cannot skip ahead. However brilliant you are, you can only ever reach the door right next to you, never the one 10 rooms away. You could not invent the microwave in the year 1650. It is impossible, not because no one was clever enough, but because the pieces it needs, the physics, the electronics, the very concept, did not yet exist. There was no door to it. It sat 100 rooms away, with no path leading there yet. And this explains one of the saddest patterns in the history of ideas. The idea that comes too early. The visionary a century ahead of their time. We tell their stories as tragedies. The genius no one understood. But often the truth is simpler. Their idea reached for a door that did not exist yet. The pieces to complete it, to build it, to even understand it, had not arrived. They were not wrong, they were early. And in the world of ideas, too early and wrong can look exactly the same. But the adjacent possible does not stay still. Every new idea, every new door you open, reveals new doors beyond it. Doors that did not exist until you stepped through the last one. Each invention becomes a building block for the next. The wheel makes the cart possible. The cart makes the road. This is why progress accelerates, why ideas cluster and build on one another. The more doors humanity opens, the more new doors appear. We are not just having ideas, we are constantly expanding the space of ideas that can be had at all. So the lesson for you is quietly practical. If you want to have the next idea, you do not stare into empty space. You go to the edge of what is already known. You learn everything up to the current frontier. You fill your mind with the pieces that exist right now. Because the next idea is never in the empty sky. It is standing just past the last thing anyone has built. And you can only find it if you have walked all the way to that edge first. So if ideas live in the adjacent possible, waiting at the next door, then something strange should happen. Something that should be almost impossible if genius were truly the source. The same idea should arrive to different people at the same time, total strangers working alone on opposite sides of the world, reaching the very same discovery within months of each other. And that is exactly what happens, again and again and again. Oxygen was discovered by two men in two countries within a couple of years. Neither knew of the other. The mathematics that underpins the modern world was invented at almost the same moment by two rivals, who then spent years fighting over who was first. The telephone, famously, had two inventors reach the patent office on the very same day. Over and over, the same idea, landing in many minds at once. And this is not a handful of odd coincidences. Researchers went looking, and they found this pattern everywhere. Scores upon scores of major discoveries made independently by more than one person at nearly the same time. It is so common, it has a name: multiples. The simultaneous, independent arrival of the same idea. And it should stop you cold. Because if ideas were truly bolts of private genius, this would almost never happen. Two people struck by the very same lightning at the very same moment. The odds would be absurd, unless the idea was never really in the person at all. And that is the unsettling truth that multiples reveal. The idea did not belong to the genius. It belonged to the moment. The pieces had all arrived. The adjacent possible had opened a new door. And the idea was simply sitting there, ready, waiting behind that door for anyone who happened to be standing close enough to push it open. It was, in a real sense, in the air, and more than one person breathed it in. So the discoverer was not the source of the idea. They were the first to reach a door that had just swung open for everyone. That does not make them nothing. Being first takes real work, preparation, obsession. You have to be standing at the frontier to walk through before anyone else. But it does, quietly, dethrone them. They did not conjure the idea out of the void. They ran a little faster to a door that history had already unlocked. So the idea waits in the adjacent possible. But how does it actually get into a mind? Not, it turns out, in a flash, but in a way far slower and far stranger. Because the great idea almost never arrives complete. It begins as something much humbler, a vague feeling, a hunch, a sense that something is there long before you can say what it is. And then it sits for months, sometimes for years, half-formed, quietly gathering pieces. Take one of the most famous Eureka moments in all of science, the theory that reshaped how we understand life itself. The story goes that it struck its author in a single flash of insight. But when historians went back and read his private notebooks, they found something remarkable. The full idea was already there, written down in pieces months before his supposed flash. He had assembled nearly the whole theory bit by bit and had not quite realized that he had. The Eureka was not the arrival of the idea. It was the moment he finally noticed the idea he already had. And this is the true shape of nearly every idea. Not a lightning strike, a slow hunch, a long, quiet, mostly invisible, ripening. The eureka, the flash, the click is real, but it is only the final second of a process that took years. It is the moment the last piece drops into place, and it feels like the whole thing happened right then, because that is the only part you were awake for. The rest happened in the dark. And this reveals a quiet danger, because a slow hunch is fragile. It is not a finished idea demanding attention. It is a whisper, easy to ignore, easy to forget. Most hunches die not because they were wrong, but because the person who had them let them slip away before they could ripen. They felt the faint pull of something interesting and did nothing. And the fragile beginning of what might have been a great idea quietly dissolved. The ones who create are often simply the ones who kept their hunches alive, which is why so many great thinkers kept notebooks. Not to record finished thoughts, but to keep the unfinished ones breathing, to hold each fragile hunch in a safe place where it could wait, and slowly collect the pieces it needed. A hunch you write down can survive for a decade, long enough to finally meet the other half it was missing. Two slow hunches that alone went nowhere can collide years later and become the thing you were waiting for. So the hunch ripens, slowly, in the dark. But where exactly does the final click happen? And here is a clue you already know from your own life. Because the idea almost never comes when you are hunting for it. It does not arrive at the desk, straining, forcing. It comes in the shower, on the walk, in the drift, just before sleep. The moment you finally stop trying. And this is not random. It points to something real about how the mind works. You have, in effect, two ways of thinking, two modes. One is the focused beam, sharp, narrow, aimed at the problem. This mode is powerful. It is how you analyze and grind and push. But it has a flaw. It only lights the obvious path. It searches where you already expect the answer to be. And a truly new idea is almost never where you expect it. The other mode is the wandering one, loose, unfocused, drifting, the state you fall into in the shower or the walk, when the sharp beam finally switches off. And in that loose state, the mind does something it cannot do while focused. It roams, it wanders far from the problem, and it starts connecting things that have no business being connected. A memory from childhood, a fact from another field, the distant piece that the focused beam would never have thought to reach for. This is where combinations are born. So the reason the answer comes the moment you stop looking is not irony, it is mechanism. The focused mind was holding all the right pieces, but it was too narrow to connect them. The moment you release it and let the mind wander, those same pieces finally drift into each other and click. The work you did at the desk was not wasted. It loaded the mind with the pieces, but the connection, the actual spark, had to wait for you to look away. And this is why some ideas arrive in dreams. In sleep, the sharpest filters of the mind fall away, and ideas that were kept apart all day by logic, by habit, are suddenly free to combine. One famous chemist is said to have solved the shape of a molecule after dreaming of a snake biting its own tail. Whether the story is exact or polished with time, The principle holds. The dreaming, drifting, unguarded mind is one of the great engines of connection. So the practice, hidden inside all this, is almost a rhythm. 2 beats. First, you fill, you focus, you load the mind hard with everything the problem needs. And then you let go, completely. You walk, you shower, you sleep, you do anything but chase it. And you trust that below the surface, the pieces you loaded are quietly finding each other. Fill, then release. Focus, then wander. The idea is not made in either beat alone. It is made in the space between them. But there is a limit to what one mind can do. Because a single mind, however full, only holds its own pieces. And some combinations need a piece you simply do not have. The other half of your idea is often sitting in someone else's head, a stranger in another field, who has the exact fragment you are missing and does not even know it matters. And this changes where ideas really come from. Not just from minds, but from the spaces between them. Think of what happens in a good conversation. You say half a thought. It knocks loose half a thought in someone else. They answer with something you would never have reached alone. And suddenly, between you, a third thing appears. An idea neither of you walked in with. This is why certain places, at certain times, erupt with creativity far beyond what their people should produce. It is not that they held smarter minds. It is that they built better collisions. Historians noticed that one great age of ideas bloomed alongside a humble new invention, the coffee house. For the first time, people from every trade, the scientist, the merchant, the poet, the sailor, sat together in one loud room and talked. Before, they had gathered in taverns, drinking, a thing that dulls the mind. Now they gathered over a drink that sharpened it. And in that new space, where different worlds collided, ideas began to breed. The room was the invention, as much as anything thought inside it. And this is the deep reason why cities spark invention, why the internet unleashed such a flood of it. They are collision machines, places where distant ideas are forced to meet. The more minds, the more fields, the more strangers connected, the more possible combinations spark to life. A good network does for ideas what the coffee house did. It takes fragments scattered across 1,000 heads and gives them a place to find each other. Isolation starves ideas. Connection feeds them. So the lesson turns outward. If you want more ideas, do not just dig deeper into your own field. Reach sideways, into fields that are not yours. Talk to people who think nothing like you. Read far outside your lane, because your next idea is very likely a piece from your field combined with a piece from a world you know almost nothing about. The most original people are rarely the most narrowly deep. They are the most widely connected. So ideas need pieces, and they need collision. But there is one more source of the new, and it is the one we are most ashamed of: error. Because a surprising number of the ideas that changed the world began as mistakes. A failed experiment, a contaminated sample, a wrong turn that happened to lead somewhere no one was looking. The most famous medicine in history was found because a scientist was careless. He left a dish out. It grew mold, a ruined experiment. But instead of throwing it away, he looked and noticed that around the mold the bacteria had died. The mistake was the discovery. A clean, careful, error-free lab would have poured it out and seen nothing. The accident was not the obstacle to the idea. The accident was the idea. And there is a cousin to the happy accident. It is when a thing built for one purpose gets picked up and used for something entirely different. The printing press borrowed from the wine press, a technology for one job, quietly reaching over to do another. Nature does this constantly. Feathers most likely began as warmth, not flight. Only later were they repurposed into wings. Some of the greatest leaps are not new things. They are old things, suddenly seen with new eyes. And all of this points at something that runs against every instinct we have about good work. We prize the clean, the efficient, the tidy and controlled. But ideas do not breed in the tidy. They breed in the mess, in the cluttered desk, the wandering conversation, the messy mix of half-related interests. A little chaos, a little error, a little wasted time spent on things that do not obviously connect. The perfectly optimized life leaves no room for the accident that changes everything. So a strange kind of permission falls out of this. The wandering, the detours, the interests that go nowhere, the hours that feel unproductive. They are not the enemy of good ideas. They are often the soil, the strange hobby, the unrelated book, the tangent you could not justify. These are the pieces you are quietly gathering for a combination you cannot see yet. Not all wandering is lost. Some of it is just an idea still gathering its parts. So bring it all together now and watch the old picture of the idea completely dissolve. The idea is not a bolt from nowhere. It is a combination of older pieces. It can only reach the adjacent door. It arrives to many minds at once because it lives in the moment, not the person. It ripens slowly as a hunch. It connects in the wandering mind. It breeds in networks and in error. Not one part of that is a lightning strike. So here is what an idea actually is. It is a collision of enough pieces in a rich enough network, ripened over enough time, until the connection becomes almost inevitable, and the genius, the special mind we imagined as the source. They were never the source. They were the place where the pieces happened to meet. The mind that had gathered enough, stood in the right network, kept the hunch alive long enough so that inside them the collision finally occurred. And this flips the deepest assumption of all. You do not really have ideas, not from nothing, not alone. You do not have ideas. Ideas have you when you have gathered enough pieces and stood in the right place long enough for them to collide. And if that lands as a loss, a dethroning of your private genius, look again, because it is the opposite. It is a release. Because if the idea is a collision of conditions, then you are not powerless waiting for lightning. You are the one who sets the conditions. You gather the pieces. You choose the network. You keep the hunches alive. You cannot force the collision, but you can make it far, far more likely. You cannot command the lightning, but you can gather the charge. So what do you actually do with all of this? You stop waiting to be struck, and you start building the storm, and it comes down to 4 quiet things, each one turning a piece of the process in your favor. None of them is magic. None of them needs a gift. They are simply the conditions under which collisions happen. Set them and ideas grow more likely. Ignore them and you are just waiting for a lightning that rarely comes. First, fill the mind. You cannot combine pieces you do not have, so gather them widely, greedily. Read far outside your field. Follow the strange interest. Learn the thing that has no obvious use. Every piece you take in is a part you can later combine. The narrow specialist has few pieces and few combinations. The wide, curious mind is stocked with parts from a dozen worlds waiting to collide. Second, connect. Do not create in isolation. The lone genius in the sealed room is the very myth we came here to break. Put yourself where ideas collide, around people who think nothing like you, in fields not your own, because the piece you are missing is almost always in someone else's head, and you will only find it if you are in the room with them. Build your coffee house, whatever form it takes. Third, keep the hunches alive. When you feel that faint pull, that half-thought, that flicker of something interesting, do not let it dissolve. Write it down. Keep it somewhere. It can wait. Because most great ideas are slow. They need years to gather their parts. The fragile hunch you catch today and keep may finally meet the piece it was missing a decade from now. The people who create are simply the ones who did not let it slip away. And fourth, once you have filled the mind, let it go. Do the work. Load the problem completely, and then step away. Walk, rest, sleep. Do anything but strain, and trust that below the surface, the pieces you gathered are quietly finding each other. The idea will not come while you clench. It comes in the release. So learn to stop chasing long enough to let it arrive. You came here believing that ideas were lightning, that you either had the gift or you did not, that creation was a magic reserved for the few. Leave knowing the truth is kinder and far more in your hands. The idea was never a gift that descended. It was a collision you can set up. The genius was never a different kind of person, just a mind that gathered enough, connected enough, and waited long enough for the pieces to meet. So stop waiting to be struck. The lightning does not choose the special. It strikes wherever enough charge has gathered. So gather it, fill the mind, connect it widely, keep the hunches breathing, and let it wander. And one day, in the shower, on the walk, the pieces you have been quietly collecting will finally collide. And it will feel like lightning. But now you will know. You were building that storm the whole time. See what people hide, even from themselves.